Well, top of the morning to y'all. It is a brisk morning here at Red Tool House. I believe we're down in the low 20s Fahrenheit. So it's a little brisk, a little frozen, which works out pretty well as long as you can stay warm. It reduces the mud, right? Well, I wanted to do a video today. It was actually a request from one of the viewers to talk about, am I really saving money by milling my own lumber? So let's dive right into that. I've crunched a lot of numbers and I'm going to share that with you now. So if you're new to the channel, I'll do a quick summary. 2 years ago, I purchased a Norwood sawmill. This is the LM29. But almost 20 years ago, I guess it's been about 17 years ago, I had a Lumbermate 2000, still a Norwood product, but I had that mill and traded it to my brother many years ago. As things changed here on the farm, decided to get a mill again, and that's why I have this. So I've got 2 years of experience with this specific mill. So the reason for investing in the mill in the first place, actually the first mill, was I was building our house and I wanted to do all the woodworking in it, and I was really getting into woodworking, so I wanted to have that resource. The reason for the second mill is as I got more into farming and homesteading, then I realized, hey, I should have kept the mill because I now have these projects like barns and corrals and cabins and brooders and all those type of things. So there's all kinds of structures that I want to build, infrastructure that I want to build on the farm. So the mill made sense from that perspective. Another justification for the mill, of course, was all the resources that I had at my disposal here on our 100 acres in the Appalachian forest. You can see there's tons and tons of wood, and it just goes a long way that way. So I had a lot of resources. If I was going out and having to buy my logs to mill, then that would definitely have been a different story. And lastly, another justification for the mill, although it wasn't happening at the time when I bought it, is lumber prices. Lumber prices right now, because of all the craziness in the world, have really climbed, and it's ridiculous how expensive raw lumber is now. So those are a lot of the reasons for having a mill and justifying it. But let's get into the actual costs. So I wanted to use my notes here so I wasn't lying to anybody, because this doesn't work all the time. So let's look at the actual cost of the mill. Now, I want to preface this with, because of the YouTube channel Norwood, we did have an agreement that helped reduce the price in some areas, but I'm going to list the price as if you were going to go out and buy it cash yourself. Then that makes a fair analysis, I think. So for the mill and everything you see there, which includes the extension, the bed extension that takes it to where I can mill up to 14 feet, 16 feet, no, 16 feet long, mill 14 feet lumber. The trailer package, so I can transport it to and fro. All the blades I purchased. So the mill, the blades, the trailer, and the extension all came to about $7,500 cash. So there's some accessories I purchased to go along with the mill as well, and we'll include that because that's part of what I do to operate. The first would be the sharpener and the tooth set, and then the grapple. So throw all that together, you got about another $1,300 in that. Now we factor in the gas that I've used over the last 2 years. $100 would be a very high estimate. I can't imagine I've even used that much. This thing is very fuel efficient and just sips the gas. So one thing I'm not going to include in this cost analysis is this. You know, this is my tractor. This is what I use to move the logs, but I already had the tractor. It has a whole lot of other function on the farm and isn't exclusive for log moving. But keep in mind, you got to find a way to move the logs, or at least get the mill to the logs one way or the other. So there's some transport that needs to be taken care of. And I'm also excluding my chainsaw and those elements that allow me to actually harvest the logs. Again, I would have a chainsaw regardless of whether I had a mill, so I'm not factoring that in. If you feel that's got to be a part of it, then you another $600 to $800 there. So that grand total comes to $8,900 US. So how does that factor out as far as the cost of lumber? Well, if we're looking at construction style lumber, here's the breakdown. And I went to our local box store website just in preparation for this video to get some accurate numbers. So right now, a standard 2x4x8 is $5.98, which is just absolutely ridiculous. When I built the workshop, granted that was 20 years ago, I remember paying $1.98 or maybe even $1.89. Not quite sure, but it was less than $2 a 2x4. So the fact that they're almost $6 is insane. So if I was just here to mill 2x4s, I would need to mill 1,488 2x4s to break even at the current prices right now. 2x6 is currently $9.42. Ridiculous. So I need 944 of those to break even. 2x6x10, which I use a lot around here, $13.37 each. So I'd need 665 of those guys. And a 4x4x8, $13.55, so I need 656 of those. And then last but not least, the 2x12x8, it's $18.42, so 483 of those. So if I was just producing that style of lumber, that's the quantities I would need to have to break even at current lumber prices. So if I was just using that logic to determine my cost analysis, then my 1489th 2x4 would actually be free, barring any issues with the mill, having to replace parts and those type of things. But that really isn't practical. So let's use it from a practical standpoint, use an example of my barn. So we started construction on the barn several years ago, and yes, the extension is not finished. It is a project in the works. But this main portion of the barn is 24 by 24. Every piece of wood in it, barring the floor of the loft, which is plywood, every stick in this was milled from lumber off of this property. Now, the majority of it was milled on my brother's mill, my old mill at the time, because I didn't have this one. But it was all milled from lumber off the property, so the material was free. The raw resources were free. Obviously, I had to harvest and bring them down. But let's look at the material list. If I had to rebuild this barn today by going out and buying that material, then here's the cost I'd have with that. Okay, the material list real quick. 25 2x10s, 69 1x8x10s, which make up the siding, and I'll put a little star by that because we'll come back to that. 11 2x4x8s, 12 4x6x10s, 44 2x6x10s, and 24 1x4x10s for the purlins. So that's all the material in this section of the barn. I'm not including the extension. So at current lumber prices, you add all that up and you're looking at $2,813.82. So for this project alone, buying the mill obviously would not justify that. I'd need to build 3 barns to break even, or build a barn 3 times the size of this. And even that analysis isn't 100% accurate, simply because one of the biggest expenses were the 1x8x10 pine boards that make up the siding. Right now, to go buy pine boards that are 1x8x10s, you're looking at $19.43 each. So anybody building a barn would not do that, I wouldn't think, unless you just got some mad loot you want to toss around. You'd most likely use metal sides or an engineered product, a plywood of some sorts. So if I was going out to build, if I was going to go out and buy all the lumber to build this barn, then of course I would not put board siding on it. But here at Red Tool House, once I start to factor in the barn, the farrowing barn, the chicken coop greenhouse, our old chicken coop, our brooder, our boar corral, various fencing, and then of course the projects we're working on up at camp at our other piece of property, and the potential to build cabins both here and up at camp, then that starts to make sense. So barring a catastrophic equipment failure, say the engine blows or the mill folds in half for some reason, then I feel that I'm pretty much close to break even with the projects that I've built so far. Okay, so that's an analysis completely based off of construction grade lumber, pine, that type of stuff, whitewood, whatever the heck that is now at Home Depot that you find. But what if we're talking about hardwood lumber like you'd use in fine woodworking or interior projects like that versus rough construction? Well, that's a whole different story, because you're looking at unit rate going way, way higher if I was to go out and buy stuff. So just here in inventory, I have 4 red oak logs. There's one here off camera. And this is all just wind damage that's fallen over. I haven't harvested any of these. And then there's a pretty nice walnut with a crotch in it that was given to me by a friend of mine. So if I wanted to factor in hardwood boards into this cost analysis, then that's a big game changer. When you go to box stores, it's ridiculous. Never go to box stores to buy hardwood lumber. But if you even go to some of these hardwood suppliers, you'll see the cost can start with a poplar board, $1 a board foot, which a board foot is a 12 by 12 by 1 inch thick board. So an 8-foot board, 12 inches wide, of course, is 8 board feet. You're looking at that being anywhere from $1 to $2 to $4, even for something as simple as poplar. Now, I've seen quarter sawn red oak and quarter sawn white oak go for as much as $6 to $7 a board foot. And I've seen walnut go $10 and up a board foot. So if I was to factor into that, again, as I mentioned at the beginning of the video, the reason why I bought the first mill in the first place was I wanted all hardwood trim in our house that I would build in the woodworking shop. And at that point too, I was building furniture and other things for other customers. So if I was going to factor that into my cost analysis, then I would say I'm definitely on the positive side, because the hardwood lumber I need and the hardwood lumber I've already milled and utilized would definitely make that cost savings much, much greater. So I've definitely saved money in the long run. So the obvious asterisk to all of this is, of course, the labor, the time, and the fact that I still have a green or wet product. So taking that into consideration, a green product, of course, has to be stacked, has to be air dried. So if I mill hardwood lumber, it's going to be at least a year before I can actually use it. Whereas if I just go to the box store, buy what I need, I can bring it home and work on my project. Also, the labor it takes. This analysis is kind of along the same lines as the question is it cheaper to eat out or to stay home and make your own meals? Well, of course, it's going to be cheaper to stay home and make your own meals because you're eliminating the labor and the ambiance and all those type of things. So this is a similar analysis. Yes, it's going to be cheaper to make your own wood, but you got to have all the ingredients, you got to have all the equipment, and of course you have to have the time investment to do so. So if you're considering buying a mill, it really comes down to, do I have the time, do I have the material, and do I want to exert all the labor it's going to take in order to produce my own lumber? So I would say if you have the resources like we do, you have a lot of timber, standing timber, and you have a lot of projects to do, then I think it really does make sense to have your own mill. So the way I like to analyze this, based on my setup and fixed costs that I have, that each board that I mill makes the boards prior to that cheaper. And right now, in the situation that I'm in, I feel I've definitely got my per board price below what I would experience at box stores. And that price is just going to keep dropping and dropping and dropping as I go along, and will only be offset by the life cycle of the mill expiring or some major upgrade that I would decide to invest in. So right now, it is a very lucrative setup for me as long as I have continued need for lumber. Now, something that would accelerate that cost savings even more is if I would decide to try to sell lumber to people. And I've had a lot of people ask, because of the channel and just because of people knowing that I have a mill locally, that they've inquired, hey, would you mill some lumber for me? I'll pay you. And years ago, I used to do that with the old mill. We'd actually go to places and mill, my brother and I, just for kind of a fun hobby thing to do. But right now, in this current stage of life that I'm in, where I'm trying to get a lot of projects done, I really don't want to take on the additional work. Yes, it could be a way to generate some extra income for the farm and upgrade the mill, but that's not on the top of my priority list right now. Well, I hope that answered some questions and shed some light on the situation. If you're thinking about buying a mill, go for it. It's a real fun piece of equipment to operate, and there's a very unique satisfaction in producing your own material that you're going to turn around and build a project with. Very cool stuff. All right, you guys take care.